Welcome back to the second episode of the Dutchy and Swoop show. We have a big episode planned today. Everything's just come out.
We have a massive episode, mate. There's lots happening in Collingwood territory. I'm excited to be here, mate.
Me too, mate. We had an agenda set out, and we've just pretty much thrown that out the window because of the Locky Schultz thing. I guess we can jump straight into that. What are your, as a former player, what are your sort of thoughts around it all? And then we'll talk about what the AFL's come out and said and all that jazz.
Yeah, obviously it's a big talking point at the moment. The umpire fraternity have come out and said, played a straight bat and said they didn't know he was down. You know, it's an oversight. It was a mistake. And then obviously the audio's come out and it was clear that the umpires knew based on the audio. First thing I actually thought was, this is just normal. Like, you know, clubs, AFL, umpires fraternity, when something happens and it's made them look bad, they're always looking for a smokescreen or a cover-up story. And there's probably, you could say at least, you know, probably 5 out of every 10 things you hear in the media that come from the AFL or clubs or the umpire fraternity, you can absolutely guarantee they're lying through their teeth just to make sure the perception is a positive one. That's how I saw this. They would have known full well that they knew, but they thought, let's protect our umpires. Let's make sure that they aren't made look bad. Let's do a bit of a cover up here. No one's going to find the audio. We'll be right. That's how I read it straight away, because obviously I played at the top level. I was at Collingwood for 8 years, and even at Fremantle for those 3 years. There was always a couple of big stories that could have been bubbling and could have got out. You know, various different things, and they never got out. And when there was some murmurs or rumours, there was always a really good cover-up story, you know, and everyone was tight-lipped, and we just keep moving on.
Yeah.
You know? So that, and I'm sure that's still going on.
No, 100% you can tell. And I think, you know, I'm not going to ask you what those stories were, but
I'll tell you later.
But I think, you know, I guess back when you were playing, they probably could smoke screen and cover it up. But now, with the world that we're living in, and there's a 24/7 news cycle, there's 1,000 footy shows on talking about the same thing. Yeah. Footy's never been scrutinised more. For them to think that, you know, if it is true that they sort of knew it was never going to come out, I called it yesterday. It's probably the biggest bombshell to sort of happen to AFL House in a long, long time.
Well, the trust factor with the public now is anytime they come out and say something, you know, obviously they come out most weekends and say that was a free kick because of this, or that wasn't a free kick because of this. And it's usually those game-saving goals or those goals that happen late in the game that cost the team a particular match, and they come out strong to protect the umpires. You're not going to believe them. Are we going to believe them anymore?
That's 100%.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how they play it from here. Has there been any more information that you know of?
So pretty much what happened was, the day after the Locky Schultz incident, they came out and said that they didn't know, the umpires didn't know, and then on the agenda said we get that audio that you mentioned, and you know, they said that, they can see him, but it's okay, keep playing, keep going. And then Laura Kane and Andrew Dillon both came out and said that they didn't know that audio existed, even though the audio from the umpires gets broadcast to all the radio stations and Fox and stuff like that. Whether they choose to play it is up to them, I guess. But I think...
the only other thing you could, like, to back the umpires, the only thing that you could say to back them in, to say it was potentially a mistake, is they heard the audio, but when, like, I know what I'm like when I'm concentrating on one thing and the wife's talking to me and she goes, "Do you remember I told you yesterday you got to pick up the dry cleaning or whatever it is?" I go, "Shit, I can't remember that." And she goes, "But you said yes, I'll do it." Maybe they heard it but didn't acknowledge it. Yeah. That is the only way you could say that maybe this is why that mistake 100%.
Was made. You can give them the benefit of the doubt, and you know, just to play sort of devil's advocate, they do have a lot of responsibility, on the field, but also when the AFL come out and suspend, you know, Paul Curtis for a tackle, for a split-second tackle that they wanted him to, you know, roll around like crocodile roll this guy out of the way, and they suspend him for 3 weeks. And they're concerned about player safety and concussion stuff like that. And I just think where I stand on it is, you didn't even need to, you wait for the ball to be back in play where Locky Schultz got knocked out. You see him. There's an umpire 3 meters away from him, and we'll put the graphic up.
Yeah.
Who he looks like he's like dead to rights. Locky Schultz on the floor, arm up, just stop the game. Doesn't matter where it is. I know we got a goal out of it, but even when Jamie Elliott took that mark, the game could have been stopped just there and then.
Yeah.
It
was on the mark. As soon as he took that mark, the game should have been stopped. Yep. Let's get him off the ground. Let's reset and go again. And that's how it should have been done. It was just an oversight, wasn't it? At the end of the day, a massive one. And now they got egg on their face. I just want to go back to that. This might sound a little bit silly, I know, but the AFL is moving in a certain direction quite fast in terms of suspensions, and the intent is not always an important thing anymore. It's the outcome.
Yep.
When do we get to the stage when we go, who was it? Was it Brayshaw that landed on Schultz in the end? Whoever it was, doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
The Fremantle player laid on and fell over, and it was an accident. We know it was an accident. He should never get suspended for that. But when do we get to the stage where you go, oh, sorry, mate, you went in too hard and you should have stayed on your feet. You've fallen on a player. You're out for 3 weeks because he got concussion. Because everything else is an accident. The tackles, the forward tackles that we just spoke about, some of these concussions and sling tackles where the guy should have been stronger on his feet and loses one leg, and then you pull him down and you get done for. They're all accidents. Most of those, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, they're accidents. So
no one's purposely
when you fall on someone's head, it's an accident as well. So do we say, hey, you've got to be better at avoiding that player when he's on the ground? I'd hate to think that we'd get to that level, but it feels like we're nearly moving in that direction.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's becoming a lot of outcome based now.
Yeah.
Because if put the Locky Schultz one was never going to be a suspension, but we'll look at the Paul Curtis one from a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
If that player didn't get a concussion, there's no way he's getting 3 weeks.
Nah.
And
if that player was strong enough to stand on his feet and acknowledge and have some awareness that someone was riding his hammer, AFL players need to know when someone's on your hammer.
Yeah.
I mean, you just got to know. And then for whatever reason, both of his legs were underneath him at the time. He needed to have one leg in front of the other and brace yourself for what might be coming behind. So I think sometimes it's the fault of the player with the ball in hand who's not protecting himself properly, he's not standing on his feet strong enough, has a lack of awareness, and then because of his lack of awareness, the player that's actioning the tackle or the bump or whatever it is, poor bloke gets done for 3 weeks just because of this idiot doesn't know how to stand on his feet properly. It actually annoys the hell out of me, but that's unfortunately there's so many grey areas in our game. That's just one of many, isn't it?
Yeah,
really.
And I think that's the hardest part about football and adjudicating and all these umpires is that we don't just have black and white rules.
Yeah,
we used to like it used to be very probably when I think when you were playing it was a little bit easier to umpire, and now it's just crazy. And I guess talking about suspension, I don't know if you want to sort of talk about this, and we can cut it if you don't. But that hit that you did on Montgomery.
Yes.
How many weeks do you reckon you get now? Do you
ever
play AFL again?
Yeah, I probably would have got life in prison for that now. Yeah, look, when I look back at it now, I actually only got 4 for that. But in my day, they had those carryover points. Remember when you go, if you had a bad record or got suspended the previous week, they would give you, say, 2 weeks. But we're going to give you a loading fee
of
50%. So I had a 50% loading fee. So I got 4 weeks plus 50% of 4 is another 2. So 2 on top of the 4 equals 6. So technically I only got 4. So I did pretty well to get 4 weeks, didn't I? Really?
Good effort.
But I know that's one of those ones. But there was a bit of a grey area at that moment where we just knew at that point in time where we just still didn't know whether you could shirt front or not.
Yeah, interesting.
So we thought that if you were within 5 minutes of the ball, you could, as long as you didn't hit someone in the head. If you go back to the vision, I know it sounds silly because it looks vicious,
but it was just.
If you break it right down in the rules at the time. It was a classic shirt front where the ball was within 5 meters. I've hit him up and down the middle. If you slow it down and frame freeze it, I didn't actually get him high. It looks like you do.
Yeah, because it's so fast.
But his head hits his ground. His head hits the ground, and that's what creates the concussion. All right, now you don't want people coming off picking people off the square. That's nonsense. But if you legally go through all the rules and things like that, technically you could say that I haven't really done anything wrong based on the 5 meter rule, based on the shirt front rule that was in place at the time, and it was probably still a grey area, shortly after that. But obviously they didn't want that type of action in the game, and it's, risks serious injury,
Exactly,
and it's fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I admit I was a thug. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
you weren't a thug. You just played the game, mate. Yeah. You needed Patrick Cripps's lawyer when he got off and
I
got that
know.
brown
I needed him. I needed him. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But so many things have changed. Like I got done, I remember, for striking Paul Williams. It's around 21, I think 2003 or whatever it was. But because he provoked me, I got off, or not got off, only got 2 weeks. I probably should have got 4 or 5.
Yeah, right.
I only got 2 weeks, but because he jumper punched me twice, and you could see it, he provoked me. I was like, my head's going back and forth like that, and I've just sort of spat the dummy and just thrown a loose arm. So, but you can't, plead under,
you can't do that anymore.
Provocacy anymore. So, unfortunately, that's one thing that's gone out. Obviously, the rules have changed and this, that, and the other. There's so many things that have changed and changed quickly. And coming back to what you're talking about, the rules, so many different rules now. I feel sorry for the umpire fraternity.
Agreed.
I really do, because it's confusing. It's confusing for them. It's confusing for us watching.
Yeah, and I guess just another quick point before we do jump onto the Fremantle game and actually talk about the game is that these umpires are running 15 kilometres a game. Yeah. And, Eddie Maguire came out and showed a different, I don't know if you saw it, showed a different way he would do the umpiring. He had, no goal umpires, 2 people on the line, 6 umpires in the middle or something where they only have zones. Because these guys are, like you said, running 15 kilometres. They've got people talking in their ear that we didn't really know about until a couple of weeks ago when we talked about it last week. Yeah. They've got a lot of things going on, which, and as a devil's advocate, as much as I yell at them and scream at them during the game. Yeah,
the Eddie one's interesting. I from one point of view, I go, I completely agree. You're running around, it's hard to see, and I can see what he's saying is you just put him in the zone. As soon as that ball crosses in your zone, it's over to you. Yeah. Does it make it more confusing again? And you got 100 umpires adjudicating in a different way, because everyone's got a slight different, thought process and the way they adjudicate in certain umpiring decisions. It's already bad enough as it is. It used to actually be a lot better when there was one umpire, because, if you play holding the ball early in the game, shit, I've got to be consistent with this now, and then they stay consistent with it. Right. If they play a deliberate early in the game and that was 50-50, maybe I could have not paid that one. Then they know they should be paying a lot of the deliberates and stay consistent with it for the rest of the game. So there's a little bit more consistency, and I'm sure you'd miss a lot of calls because you're too far from the action. But when there was 1 or 2 umpires, I remember it being pretty good, the umpiring. But mind you, there was less probably rules back then.
Yeah,
in those days too.
Now it's just they've just convoluted it all.
Yeah. But there's a bit of a call, isn't there, at the moment with some of these? Like I think Hardwick was talking about it, and a couple of the other coaches and ex-players and so forth, that maybe we should strip back some of these rules of pushing in the back rule, go back to what we first learned.
Oh, mate, I reckon we could do a whole 3-hour podcast. That pushing in the back rule, just quickly while you mentioned it, is insane now. It should just be, you touch them in the back, that's it. It's a free kick. It used to be. Now it's like, but you have to have your arms fully extended. Yeah. Like Tom Hawkins used to get away with bloody murder.
I think you're right. I think that one needs to come back in, because the problem is as soon as someone touches someone on the back now, they know that they've probably touched me with their hands. I'm just going to lunge forward and play for a free kick. And it just looks like an obvious free kick until you actually go back and look at it later and put in slow-mo or whatever and see that the players played for it. And they're giving those free kicks to forwards who are kicking a lot of goals out of these circumstances. But if they're doing this each and every time, you're happy for them to give them a bit of a nudge. Yeah. And if they're good enough to do that, that's a bit of a skill of the game in itself. And, they should be paying those marks. But, I like it. It's more clean cut.
Yeah, and that's exactly what football isn't, clean cut at the moment.
That's right, exactly right, 100%.
Look, let's talk about this Fremantle Collingwood game. Yeah. Go over to the West. We sort of talked about last week the players we were resting. People came out and saying we weren't taking it seriously enough or anything like that. We come out, we have a really good win, even though, you've got all the stats there to show that Fremantle just absolutely had an incredible day, though. Yeah,
look, I was just looking at the stats and just going through them yesterday and thinking, this is unbelievable. How the hell did they win this game? But it felt like they should have won it. It felt like they were in control, don't get me wrong. But Freo were plus 75 disposals, plus 28 inside 50s, plus 13 clearances, plus 6 in disposal efficiency, which I wouldn't have thought on the night, plus 7 in uncontested possessions, and one contested ball, plus 12 as well. So I'm thinking, how the hell did they win this? But they're just, when you break it down, they're just more efficient than the opposition going inside. When they get a look in their forward half, they don't make mistakes. They're very efficient on the way in. The way they set up, and they open up space, and they bring the ball to the offside very quickly. They lane shift, bring the ball to that third lane, the offside to the wingers and the Bobby Hills of the world.
Yes, yep.
They've got some quick, smart players that can get some really good footy. And once they win it in space forward to centre, they're very hard to stop. And you can see, I think they had 14 marks inside 50 again compared to, I think, Fremantle's 8 or whatever it was. So we're getting numbers back and we're defending really well. We're getting a lot of support through our wingers and midfielders. And our ability to zone off at the right times is really strong. And then we're getting some good looks on turnover as well. And as you know, we're able to feed one thing. If you watch obviously you watch their training all the time, but they train for using the ball under heat in your back 50 and not just getting the ball out of defence any which way they can. They're actually looking to be really sharp on the way out and quick on the way out and get shoulders out so they can get some really good efficient looks by foot. And then that just opens everything up. Once they get that clear ball out of D50, when the congested numbers are there and you can weave your way through, the space is, everyone's bubbled up and the space is out the back. So, and then they've got those quick forwards that are quite efficient, like we've just been talking about. So that's why they're getting 14 plus marks inside 50 every week. And they did kick straight too. Finally. Compared to the week before. So. That's one thing that you have to do in this game. You have to be efficient now, and these things tell a story because stats mean nothing anymore. They absolutely mean nothing. It is the way you move the footy, the way you set up, the way you move the footy, your efficiency, both inside 50, around the ground, and also shots on goal. Yes, yep. If you're going at 70%. In front of goals, you can the bottom team can beat the top team in any given weekend.
And we saw that. I think the great example of that was the Richmond-Carlton game right at the front. Carlton had a lot of look in, but Richmond were just more clinical in front of goal. And you mentioned Collingwood training, and so I think one of the things that I've loved about going to training and watching them and then watching the game is that you see them, the things that they're doing in training, you get to see them do it in game. And it's every single session, and I'm not even being facetious or having a joke. Like every single session, whenever there's a match sim, you just hear Craig or Fly blow the whistle. He goes chaos ball, smash it forward. Let's work around how we sort of get that done. And I think I remember a couple of years ago, everyone sort of laughing at us and saying that. You probably remember when we were winning all those close games, everyone's like, oh, it's luck. Yeah. And Craig's like, no, we've been training, literally specifically training for these 2-minute scenarios, these 3-minute scenarios, kill the ball or whatever it may be. And then you go to the flip side and you look at Alistair Clarkson and the Kangaroos. And last year he came out and said, what's the point of training these scenarios if we're never going to be there? Yeah. And then you see them on the weekend against Brisbane where they were in the lead and then they obviously don't know how to train those scenarios. So it is... You train the way you want to play, and you would have experienced that as well.
You've got your philosophies, your game plan based on your player personnel, and then, obviously there's some ways you want to move the footy. You've got ball movement, you've got stoppage work, you've got your setups, and you want to see some evidence at training that you can do these things with real confidence, and that gives you confidence to go in there on game day and get those things done. But even at training, things I learnt from VFL and going down, and Bucks invite me to train a couple of times to go down in meetings and watch training. You pick up some really good stuff. But really, they break off and do their 3-group or 4-group rotations, and they're all different facets of the way they want to move the footy or the way they want to defend. And they just zone in on those areas and just try and perfect them. So then when you get to game day, with all the nerves and all the excitement and the adrenaline going on, you can just go into autopilot and click onto what you need to do. So it is really important the way you train and making sure you train like you play and setting up the way you want to set up.
And I think a good point of that is also the next man up mentality, and I don't think a lot of football clubs have that. But we brought in, we're talking about it off camera. You know, Ed Allen to do a role, Lachie Sullivan to do a role. You know, you lose 1,000 games of experience, and you know, even though people were saying, oh, you know, you're taking the piss, like Collingwood, you know, they're not taking Fremantle seriously enough. You know, I think that was it was really good to see that our system could still stack up without, you know, Steele Cyberman had played 47% of game time, got subbed out, had 7 disposals. Nick Dacos, he was carrying an injury, but he was tagged pretty well by Wagner, kicked a goal and had like 18 or something. No one besides Jack Crisp, who had the best game of his career, had over 20 disposals. And we still went over to Optus Stadium where they're a 5-6 goal better team and beat them.
Well, it's actually a bit of a masterstroke when you look at it. I was nervous about it. I mean, it's a difference. So, like, you think about if Fremantle had kicked straight and won that game, everyone would be going, oh, geez, McRae stuffed this up. What's he done? You know, this could cost them top 4, whatever the case may be. But he's backed himself in. He's backed the squad in. And like you say, systematic. One troop comes out, the next one comes in. They understand the role. They back their young players and say, look, well, you know, if we didn't go and recruit like the way we did, these guys would be playing anyway. And we'd be still backing them in to win games of footy, which I would agree with as well. You'd still like to think that you could win enough games, even if they didn't get the memories and, you know, and these guys in the trade last year. So, your system has to do the work for you, and obviously the playing group, the young players coming through need to understand the game plan inside and out, and have you know, obviously got some good coaches at VFL level, and you know, the system is rolling along nicely at the moment. But, you know, at the end of the day, they still had some bloody good players on every single line the other night. And that's probably what our side looks like. If we get 4 or 5 injuries at the moment, that's what I see it's going to look like. We're going to need to, you know, win games of footy with those younger players and more inexperienced players. And it just gives you a little bit of faith that we can do that if that was to happen.
100%. And I remember, you know, we caught up during the preseason before, you know, any of this sort of started. And you specifically mentioned that last year, even though we had a down year, getting games into Ned Long, Sullivan, Allen, Parker, these guys would come to fruition. And it case in point, innit?
Yes, that's right. Well, Ned Long's playing some super footy. As you know, Ed Allen's come in last week. What did you think of Ed's game
I liked him. Yeah. I liked his game. I think I'd rather see him, you know, as an inside mid or just as a midfielder in the hustle and bustle. But I think thought Jack Crisp did an incredible job as that inside mid.
Crispy was sensational, and we're talking about this last week that the next leader has to step up, and he's kind of taken over the Pendlebury role last week, hasn't he? Really, and done it as well, if not better, than what Pendles has done it in the last however long. But what do you have? 29, kicked a couple of goals. You know, and you know, you just love that from your next tier leaders. I mean, he's one of the top leaders. There's no question. I don't even know if he's in the leadership group, to be honest.
No, he's not. No.
Well, you know, what a luxury to have. You got a guy that's like played however many games, and you know, he's 30, he'd have to be 30 plus now, wouldn't he, Chris?
Just 30, maybe 30. Just 30. Yeah.
And he's not even in the leadership group. Like at any other club, he's probably captain. Really, when you look at it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Or a vice captain. So, you know, that's a luxury we've got at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that's something good to note is that when we have those big leaders down, like Maynard, the vice captain wasn't there. You know, Pendlebury wasn't there. Sidebottom's not firing. Nick Dacos. Those guys step up, and we saw it all across the park. And I guess talking about leaders is that Captain Darcy Moore did his shoulder. Yeah, will be out. Jordan Ngoe, we were talking about this off camera with that Achilles inflammation or tendonitis, whatever you want to sort of call it. Won't be playing, and I think the scariest thing, like with Darcy Moore, he'll come good 1 to 2 weeks. With Jordan Ngoe, they've got on their injury list, they've got him as TBC. Yeah. So they don't even know. And you were saying that you sort of went through that as well. Yeah,
well, I had the Achilles tendinopathy, you know, for a long time, probably 2.5 years on and off. And I ended up having an operation, probably 12 months too late in the end. You know, it is like when I look back at my career, like between 2003, 4, 5, and 6, those 4 years, I couldn't have played any better for me and my ability and consistency. But at 2007 onwards, or 2006 halfway through, I missed some games. I really just stuffed my momentum completely, and I just hope to God that Jordan can get this right, because it was a career killer for me. At 25, 26, I was the height of my career, and by 28 I was finished. Because I just couldn't play. I couldn't get out in the park for 2 years straight. Now De Goey, you'd like to think they'd hold on to him longer and make sure they get it right because he's a star.
Yeah.
But I just get nervous that what do we have to do to get him back to 100%? Don't even worry about the next 5, 6, 7 weeks. I want him first week of the finals firing first week of the finals. If that means that he has to come back at round 20 to play VFL and that he's 100% fit, I reckon you'd prefer that so that he can get some consistency in his training. Because that's the one thing. When you're off legs and you're off your Achilles, it does need some sort of loading, but you're not getting that loading, you're not getting that intensity in your training, and it does affect the way you play as well. It's a running game now, and with used to be unlimited rotations when I was playing. Now it's limited. So instead of coming on for 6-7 minutes and then coming off for 90 seconds rest, like we used to, they're out there for 12-15 minutes at a time on some occasions because of those rotations things. So he needs to be able to run. They can't afford to bring him on and off, and nurse him through. He's got to be cherry ripe before they bring him back. And
I think that's one of the big concerns in that Geelong game is that he just had no power. Craig McRae's philosophy for the last couple of years has been fit to play versus fit to perform. And they've been playing Jordan De Goey, but he hasn't been fit to perform. He was getting monstered in the one-on-one contests in the forward line. They've chucked him in the middle in the last quarter. He had 2 disposals, I think a clearance. As some guy who, we don't make the final, we don't win a grand final. Forget about his kick at goal. That was just incredible. But his work around that GWS game, his centre work and that midfield sort of work. So we don't win any finals without him. Do you think, like you said, round 20 or whatever it may be, that he just needs a training block and do the same thing that they've done to Mitchell, where give him 50% in the VFL, then 75, then send him through? I
mean, we're sort of, there's a bit of guesswork from us because we know it's an Achilles. And we don't know because sometimes they're slightly different than others. But if it's a genuine sort of tendinitis-y sort of issue, you'd like to think that maybe he doesn't need to go. Remember the days when they used to send a few of the boys away to Arizona?
For a big block.
Do a block of training. I think Swanee did it one year and he came back flying after that. That might be something you could do, like get him to altitude training and heat training or whatever it might be. Do some off legs and just whatever he needs to do to get himself right. I'd rather see De Goey at his absolute best in the latter half part of the year, and rather than see him at 70% at the moment.
I think
that's just not good. It's not doing anyone any favours. And they probably thought we can get away with nursing him in, playing him in bits and parts and building his fitness up. Obviously, the problem is then your Achilles is getting worse in the process. So if you get it back to 85, 90%, you're running the risk that it's going to get worse again. You've got to get it back as close to 100% as you can. And even if that impedes your fitness a little bit in the time being, then at least when you're right, at least you can train flat out at 100% because your training, is so important in this day and age. You have a consistency in your training, especially leading into finals. So hopefully you can get it right. He's really important because you think about it, like with the way that they're going. I know they've got a couple out at the moment, Moore's out, etc. But they did it tough last week with a few guys out. But if they get their full squad together, you think about it, more back fully fit, and then De Goey fully fit as a bit of icing on top of the cake for finals. It's scary to think we're going to be very hard to stop.
Well, if you can get Jordan De Goey at 100% for the first week of finals, that has to be the goal. It has. I know obviously that's stupid to say, but we played effectively how I saw it against Geelong. We played one player down, where Ed Allen could have played that role, Lockie Sullivan could have played that role. And I guess glass half full is Jordan De Goey does have this block where he goes, looks after himself, he gets a big block in. Then you get 6, 7, 8 games into Ed Allen, 6, 7, 8 games into Lockie Sullivan. These second tier players that come up and they will be, best 23. Then, I guess a good case in point is Tom Mitchell. Now he's returned, which is amazing to see.
Go the number 6.
The number 6 is back at the Pies. But now Ned Long is playing he's got 2 hands on the throttle, and now Mitchell will have to play better than Ned Long is playing in the AFL to overtake. Do you think there is do you think there is room for a Mitchell and a Ned Long in the same team?
Look, if they're going well enough and they've got, enough speed and, on the outside, you can't have too many good players in your team. Yeah. I know you've got to get the balance right. There's no question about that. You've got to get the balance right. Maybe it is one too many, but, maybe that's a decision you have to make. How fit is Mitchell? How good a form is he in?
Yeah.
Maybe if Ned's playing okay, maybe they just move him out for a week or two and bring Mitchell back and trial it and see how it goes. Maybe they find if they've won enough games, maybe they find a way to trial both of them together in the same midfield and see if it works. Maybe it's just horses for courses and see who they're playing. They're playing a quick team, a quick young team. They leave one of them out and play the one that's in the best form. They're playing maybe like a Carlton type who have got more, medium paces in the middle. You can play both of them.
Yeah.
I don't know. You can mix and match, and if you've got enough good players in different areas, you can get away with it anyway. And like I said, you can't have enough good players in your side in any given weekend. And Tom Mitchell's a Brownlow medalist and a 30 possession getting player in his entire career.
Yeah,
it's going to be hard to say, sorry mate, we're going too well. You're not coming in, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of Collingwood at the moment is that we do have that depth, and depth will need to shine through against the Crows because they have got the best attack in the AFL.
Yeah.
Those three-pronged trident that they've got Thilthorpe, Walker, Fogarty.
Yep.
You got Chuck Rankin in there as well, and Keys,
yes.
but no Darcy Moore. Billy Frampton has to turn into a Spartan warrior on the weekend.
Yeah, well, we haven't talked about it before. I'm thinking the matchups where they're going to go. Obviously, Dean has to come in. I can't see how they can't play him. He has to come in. I think Frampton probably has to go to the best of those three, the best tallest, and I think Fogarty's obviously more of a medium-sized, stockier marking forward. Thilthorpe's genuine 200 centimetres, and he's probably the form player
in the
of
comp
him and Walker
as well.
and in the comp. So Frampton probably goes to Thilthorpe, I would have thought. I'm thinking maybe Dean goes to Fogarty potentially. Or Walker, I don't know. It's just hard to tell.
Would you put Maynard on? Because Maynard has played on
Dean goes to Walker.
Maybe
Dean goes to Walker, and then Maynard comes in and plays on Fogarty, they're probably not too much difference in size and height anyway. Really,
I think they're practically the same.
So that's probably the way that I'd go, and you'd back sort of Dean in against the old man Walker, and then
you got Jeremy Howe flying through as well.
That's right, and let's get Jeremy Howe to zone off at the right times and give a bit of aerial support for those guys. And like we said before, at the end of the day, it comes down to the midfield brigade, and if you can get that right. But the one thing about Adelaide is, as good as they are, they can leak. They can leak goals. They can kick a massive score and win, but then the opposition still kicks 90 points as well. So I think Collingwood can expose that part of their game and find their weaknesses in defence because they are very efficient, like we've spoken about. And going inside 50, that's where their weakness might be. They are very front-running at various times, and most of the times, because they're so good, it comes off. But if they're not getting enough footy, if Collingwood get on top 55% in stoppage and clearance, and able to defend their back 50 really well, they're going to get some really good looks off turnover, I think. But it'll be interesting. New challenges, new game. I do think if Adelaide are able to get over Collingwood, which we hope they don't, and we very much hope they don't, that they probably deserve to be flagged for favourites.
100%. And they've, like you said, they have been playing good football. They're the best offensive side, best attacking side in the league with those sort of big keys. I think the one thing, and we talked about this a little bit before, in the Port Adelaide, in the showdown, which was a fantastic game, close game, could have gone either way right at the end. Port Adelaide, much like Fremantle did last week against us, were they monstered it. They were, I think, plus 27 in clearances. Inside 50s, they had over 60. And again, they weren't efficient. Yeah. Efficiency they should have beaten on paper. Yeah. They should have beaten the Crows by 3 or 4 goals, but they just couldn't find the goals. Yeah, we were talking about this before. The modern game sort of, the stats can go out the window a fair bit because it is about efficiency. Like if you don't get it right going forward, the opposition that come back twice as quick, and you allow them scores on the way back. The clearest scores come from turnovers, as we know, or obviously stoppages. You can get some really good looks, but
But most teams are really good at setting up behind the footy and obviously stopping some clear scores from stoppage through pressure and through getting an extra number behind the footy, or just being good to come forward and defend or zone off at the right time. So I still think, in this day and age, your clear scores come from turnover. So you've just got to get that right, going inside 50 and possess the footy, kick mark inside, and then obviously scoring with efficiency on the way in. The best form of defence is kicking accurately in this day and age. But you go back to that game, the Adelaide game, and this is one thing we spoke about off screen before, is Adelaide are coming off a derby, whatever they call it in South Australia. They are big games, huge games, and the emotions and the media, and they've got some young players, Adelaide, some good young players, but, to feel that emotion, to get out there and make it happen and find a way to lunge to the line and get the win, they'd be going... But you know what? Mentally, to get yourself up again, travel to Melbourne, play on the MCG in front of 90,000 people. That is another big ask for some of these guys. And I think I read out, without naming names at the moment, there's 5 guys there in the Adelaide list. I'm not sure what changes they're going to make this week, but their rating points were 40 or under. 5 of them that had no impact on the game at all. 3 or 4 of those guys play, they'll be nervous about, geez, I didn't play well in a derby last. Now I have to go to the MCG and play on against Nick Dacos and the like at Collingwood and hear the roar of the black and white crowd. That would be nerve-wracking for a young Adelaide player. And that's why I say if Adelaide can find a way...
That's why they would be their credentials, they
can find a way to win. This would be huge for their footy club. This should be one of their biggest wins for a long period of time, and will put them probably in pole position for flag favouritism.
Yeah, and I guess you make a good point with the getting yourself up for a showdown. I guess as a former Pies player, the Carlton Collingwood games would have been the sort of biggest ones during the home and away. Maybe you played a couple of Anzac days as well, right?
Yeah, I played 5 or 6 Anzac days as well.
Getting yourself up for that, and then the next week, did you sort of feel the same?
Oh, you definitely are. You have a big win in general. Sometimes just forgetting about, finding a way to win and the emotion and, being a bit flat or whatever. But mentally you have a big win. And it's just like you don't want to feel or think that way, but it's just that little bit of complacency. And some players have it more than others, and you don't even notice it sometimes. But because you go, thank God for that, we won the last 2. We had a big win on the weekend. We beat flag favourites on the weekend. We've arrived. We should beat this team this week because they're only 4th on the 14th on the ladder, whatever it is. And sometimes they're the games that you lose because you go in at 90%. If everyone's at 90% and the opposition are thinking, we have to actually play it our absolute best and crack in as hard as we can for 120 minutes. Otherwise, we're no chance of winning. Yeah. That team's going in with that mentality, and you're going in with that, we'll be right, and that's when you've got a game on your hands. It squeezes up and comes together close. Right. So that's the mentality of footy from any given week to week, and it is a mental game, as you know, and that's why you see some teams like North Melbourne draw with Brisbane.
Yes,
on the weekend.
And what are your sort of predictions for this game, this Adelaide game?
Oh, look, I still think that Collingwood can get it done. Like I said, I feel like we're good enough with our efficient midfielders and forwards to be able to find their weaknesses. And I think their weaknesses are in transition. Adelaide, they go for it. In offense, they go for it. They run in waves. They're very good. They're very skillful, we know. But they'll just go for it. And I'm not sure if they're ready to win a flag based on their defensive coverage in transition at the moment, because they can be scored against. I think we are the one team that can test their inability to defend for 120 minutes. Yeah. So I see us winning. I see this could be a big scoring game again, potentially. I think we'll kick a score and they'll kick a score, but our score will be a bit bigger than theirs. It might be one of those. It's 110 to 90 or something like that.
Out. I think it is. And
mind you, it is going to be wet, we were saying.
Yes, we're saying raining, windy.
That's only if it's not wet. It might be a shit fight if it's wet. I don't know.
It's I think, and that comes into play a lot. Like you look at that Geelong game where it was raining and Collingwood were able to play, dry football during the wet, and then in the end, we know sort of what happened there. But we are, I think Collingwood, for as long as I can remember, were notoriously good in the wet, was
Yeah.
what they would sort of tell us. Like,
Yeah.
I guess just quickly touching on that,
Yeah.
how much, obviously I know that the game changes from wet to dry, but as a player, how do you sort of change your tactics or mentality like with that?
Yeah, you've definitely got to change it. Obviously, we talk about the flat hands in the wet, not over handballing. You got to get the ratio right. So you might be 1-2 handballs into a kick rather than 3-4 to a kick. It might even be just quick kicks out of stoppage. I always like to get an extra player behind the footy in wet weather because it is a little bit like one handball, one kick out of stoppage a lot of the time. So that player that gets 35 metres, 40 metres behind the 40 behind every stoppage becomes important, so that you can cover off on that. So there's a whole host of things as well. You got to play, obviously, the line a little bit more, not be too risky through the middle of the ground unless it's clear. So there's a few things like that. Just turning and going in when you've got even numbers inside forward 50, because as soon as you've got that, equal numbers inside 50, just go to it. The kick doesn't even have to be perfect. Just get it in quick, and make the opposition defenders nervous. And the ball quite often spills, and with a bit of luck, can skim over the back, and you can get a couple of easy goals as well.
That's where Bobby's kicking 3 or 4.
Yeah, correct. He'd be great in wet weather, obviously, that type of player as well. But also, just from a selection point of view, you go like, Tom Mitchell, and not that he's necessarily ready yet, but if
that's
he was
the type
ready,
of player that you want.
You'd be considering Tom Mitchell and Ned Long in the middle.
True.
Because they're clean, and they're really good in those type of conditions, and they're going to get exposed with their leg speed on the outside.
Exactly.
As much.
I just think it's going to be such a good game. I'm so excited for it, and
same.
and you got to think that we rested those players last week,
Yep.
but now you get the opportunity to bring in Maynard, Myshek potentially, and Scott Pendlebury, into a team.
It's become a masterstroke, this whole management thing. And if it comes off this week and they play really well, and those guys in particular, if they have good games, then the Freo will be walking around with the chest out going, shit, we've pulled this off. Because this was always going to be a challenging period, playing those many games within, 16 days?
It was
like
just
that.
crazy.
And obviously the 5-day break in between. So I think he's done it well. You have to plan for it, because the problem is if you don't plan for it and it's, you throw your eggs into, I said I'd throw my eggs into that first basket, but if you do it and you still lose, and then everyone's cooked on the third week, you go from going, shit, like maybe we should have managed it. At least we could have won on the third week and been fresher on the third week. So there's a few things to consider. I think he's done it perfectly, and not always these things come off, but it looks like it's going to come off and be a winner for them, especially if they get over the line on the weekend.
If I see Pendles kick 2 and have 30, they'll build a statue for McRae outside of the AOA Centre.
Exactly. But he'll come up well. These guys that are in their 30s, as much as they're elite athletes and they recover well and they're professionals, they're still, I don't know, was he 36, 37?
Yeah, 37, I think,
Still 37 years old. At that stage, my body was banged up. Like, I couldn't even get a kick in local footy by the time I was 37. And because the recovery from week to week, mind you, I was having a few beers after the game. Pendles probably doesn't do that. But you're not getting, your body's not coming right. It's time to go play Masters and have it play every second week in the Masters around that time. And you feel good. So if you play every second week, your body feels great. I feel great this week, but backing up. It's not easy. So he might come up really well, and
that's exciting.
Hopefully we get a really standout game from Pendles.
That's
on the
exciting,
weekend.
mate. Before we wrap up, on Instagram we asked people if they have any questions for us. I've got a bunch here that I want to ask. Yeah, let's get them up now. All right, we don't have a name for this segment yet, but. Caleb B32 asks you specifically, Dutchy, who was the worst teammate to room with on interstate trips?
Oh, it's the worst roommate to team up with. Geez, I don't even know, to be honest.
Did you guys used to stay in the same hotel?
I stayed with Pebbles a few times. He was really good. He's just a great guy, and he was just really easy. I was with Chris Tarrant. Wasn't good because he'd always want to go out after the game when you weren't allowed to. So he's probably the worst one. He'd always get you in trouble. I think I started with Hoddy Williams. Hoddy was good. He was actually. I'm trying to find someone who wasn't good, but Andrew Williams was great because he's just a dry humour. You just find yourself laughing the whole trip. But definitely not Chris Tarrant.
Definitely not Chris Tarrant. So Chris Tarrant, if you're watching, the worst one for getting in trouble with Mick.
Yeah.
I've got another one here.
Yes.
So you've probably heard of the 100 gorillas versus 1 man versus, or 100 men versus 1 gorilla.
Yeah.
Some has said 100 Anthony Rockers versus 1 gorilla. Who wins?
I think that's easy. I think 1 Anthony Rocker would beat 100 gorillas, to be honest. I've got a couple here too. I mean, everyone's talking about the 3 talls, the Adelaides. Everyone's concerned about that. I am, you are, but we really just have to win it out of the middle, and we have to be efficient with the ball going forward, don't we? At the end of the day.
That's it. Like I think around that, and I always say this when we're playing, Carlton or like the Gold Coast and stuff, is when you come up against these forwards, they're going to kick 3, or like Kurno, he's going to kick 3 or 4 goals on his best day.
Correct.
It's about being efficient going forward, and our 6 forwards kicking 3 goals each. Like that game a couple of weeks ago where the Triple M's, and I wish Mixtape was playing, kicked 10 goals between them, and then Elliott popped up with 2. We kicked 16.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
100%.
they can kick 3 or 4. It's about
you
being,
can have one of those forwards
kick
a bag, and we still win at the end of the day.
Exactly
like I
right,
said, it's probably if the rain doesn't come, it's probably going to be a high scoring game, and you just got to go. Team defence. Someone's going to have a day out. It always happens. You can be assured of that. You just got to cover off or win your fair share of clearances and be efficient on the way forward and kick the goals when they're there to be kicked. There's some funny comments and that coming through. Is Bo McCreary still the bench press king? I don't even know. Is he the bench press king?
Yeah, he is the bench press king.
What was he benched? Do you know?
I wouldn't be able. I'll find out.
Because I was 155.
Were you benching 155? I've seen those. I've seen those pictures, mate.
And I only weighed 78 kilos, I might add.
Jeez
too. All right. Now I'm just spruiking now. But I couldn't beat Bucks. Bucks was always the strongest.
Would it have been...
that was when I did my Achilles, actually.
Yeah, when you were trying to do 150.
When I couldn't do leg weights and I was just doing upper body, and my whole body was completely off balance at that stage.
Who could lift more, you, Bucks, or Liquor?
Liquor and I were pretty similar.
Yeah.
He's probably a little bit more than me, Liquor. He's probably always got me by 2.5 to 5 kilos, which used to shatter me. But Bucks was always bigger and stronger. He was always sort of around 155, 160 bench press as well. So there was someone that used to just, I can't remember who it was now, but there was always 2 or 3 in front of me towards the end. But someone said here, why don't the Rocker Brothers ever get down to the club? I think they do, don't they?
They do. But I think they're doing their own sort of... Yeah. I think Sav is coaching somewhere, and I think Pebbles did come down a while
Pebbles was coaching in the Northern Knights.
And their kids are coming up as well. I think they're in like under 15s or something, so we might have a couple more father-sons, which we've got a plethora of. Your kids as well, if they want to.
My boys don't seem too interested at the moment. They're playing, but I don't know how interested. My daughter's probably a bit ahead of them at the moment, so maybe her. The Q seems to have shifted from running half back to a lockdown defender. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I have noticed a change to his game, definitely. But I feel like with the addition of Houston in there, I think they're giving more leg room to Houston and Josh to do that sort of running. Yeah. And I like Q as a shutdown defender, and he could be someone that plays on run off
when he wins contest anyway. Yeah, so and he's got a strong body. And he's quick as well, so he's probably playing a little bit more on those. Yeah, and he's just changed. Small forwards,
just changes because you look at his disposals the last couple of games, and he's not getting as much as he was in the premiership year. Yeah, but that's because we didn't have Josh on the half back line. We didn't have Dan Houston on the half back line in 2023. Yeah, that's right. It was Darcy Moore. It was Markov. It was Q. And now, like we're talking about depth, depth comes in, and we can put these guys where they need to play. Maybe you do see Q on a Fogarty maybe, and Maynard on a Walker. There's so much that
he
we
can play small, medium, tall, can't he? Really, but it'd be a bit of risk putting him on Fogarty, I reckon. Yeah, still, I would have thought. But like you said, if the ball comes in the way you want it to come in, haphazardly, through good pressure through the midfield, then it doesn't really matter. You can play anyone on these guys, really, at the end of the day.
Just need another bag of 6 from Jamie Elliott and we'll be sweet.
That'd be nice. Geez, that was beautiful, wasn't it? Someone there's just said, who's my favourite player?
Yeah.
I reckon every time that someone says, who's your favourite, I mention a different player. It depends who's playing well that week, really, doesn't it? So, Elliott, you're my favourite player at the moment. Geez, it was a good game.
Oh, mate, and could be a smoky for All-Australian. First All-Australian in 14 years or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be a great effort. Because he's a pretty selfless player too. Like he blocks for his teammates. There's times when he could fly, when he protects someone in. He gives the ball off as well, shares the ball around. You know, he could. There's other players in the league that don't square the ball up. They kick from the boundary when they should as well, and things like that. So he's a very selfless player,
exactly,
and a high pressure player in that role, which you need to be in this day and age. But he's been a high pressure player for a long period of time. Selfless, which sometimes means that you don't get the accolades,
you don't get the goals
at AA because your stats don't read quite as well. So you got to think of these things as well. So good luck. Hopefully he continues the form and gets all Australian. I'd love to see that.
Oh, it would be incredible. Dutch, we'll head it there. Yes. Big game against Adelaide. We'll be back here Wednesday next week discussing that game, looking ahead at the North Melbourne game and anything that happens in between. Mate, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, mate. Good on you.
Done.
Swoopy.
We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you've got a game plan, you've got player personnel, and you work your game plan against obviously your player personnel and what your side looks like. Whoa!
Bit too heavy.
Oh, there we go.
That'll be good on the blip. That'll be good on the blip.
That's the second time that's happened.
Maybe just sit it up.
Rob got a bigger hook at the start of the week so that it would.
Yeah, I think it needs to be fucking drilled in. If we're gonna.
I'll let him know that that's happened again.
Lucky didn't break.
Yeah, it is pretty heavy though, so that's all right.
That's the only time the pies will fall this week. Yeah. So I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
Training.
Training, yeah. So you've